Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Rennebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I am Todd Rennebaum, and I am excited for this episode. I get to speak to a shining star, a beautiful soul, a wonderful positive influence for mental health and suicide prevention and education in Saskatchewan. His name is Tristen Durocher. If you don't remember that name, he was in the news quite a bit last summer. He had walked from northern Saskatchewan some 630 kilometers with his journey called Walking with Our Angels. He started that journey after a suicide prevention bill was voted down by 44 MLAs. Not only did he walk that 600 and some kilometers, but he then set up a teepee and fasted for 44 days on the lawn of the legislative buildings. He then set up a photo gallery of different people that have lost their lives to suicide, and he kind of beat the government in a court hearing. And not only did he have to go to court and win that hearing, but the judge that ruled over that hearing actually came and visited him at the camp. It's a wonderful story. I was actually a little starstruck speaking to him, to the point that I was a little intimidated even. Everything he says has a very deliberate, thoughtful response to it, and it was just a delight to speak to him. Anyway, take a listen to the interview, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I enjoyed doing it. So how long after the suicide prevention bill was voted down did you decide to take this journey to Regina?
I decided that very day that the article came out about the unanimous voting down, just because it struck me that it was completely unanimous of a vote. It just disturbed me. I just felt that was a lot of confidence in their disregard of this as a very important and pressing issue. So I started planning the walk literally the next morning and sharing the idea with friends and getting their feedback and ideas on it, and everything just took off from there, because it actually maybe 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks from the night of finding out about that bill being voted down to the walk actually beginning. So everything started very quickly.
What made you decide, how has suicide impacted your life in the North, and just in your life?
Well, I just wanted to, I thought the timing was very perfect because it was so close to an election time, and also because of the COVID pandemic, the park was completely free. So I knew that we wouldn't be infringing on any events taking place in the public park. So I just felt that this was a great timing to have something of this nature that calls attention to the suicide rates in our province.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what made me do it. It was kind of just being really offended. I wanted somewhere to put that anger that was constructive. And I'm a musician and artist who's used to traveling and gatherings and a lot of things happening during the summer months. But this past summer, I found myself completely empty, completely free of obligations, and travel and commitments. And I realized it was probably my first summer at home in about 9 or 10 years, because my summers have been so busy. So I thought, instead of just sitting at home and doing nothing, I could do something meaningful and constructive and more communal as a response to how I felt about that bill being voted down. So it started with me and 3 or 4 friends, and it kind of grew from there. But as an Indigenous Northern person, I mean, suicide has been a concept that I was introduced to very early on in life, because there's been family members or people that have taken their lives, but also in the community, it's just kind of an unavoidable reality. And if it doesn't happen in the form of really overt somebody taking their lives, sometimes it happens in the form of like self-destructiveness and drug misuse and abuse that goes to lethal levels, where people assume it's an accident or an overdose, but really you kind of know that there was a lot of self-harming behavior in that individual prior to their
Right.
to their lethal dose. So yeah, it was nothing new. It was not breaking news, but it was kind of becoming more prominent and prevalent in the recent years. And I don't know if this is just because we're more interconnected because of social media, and you hear about all of the incidences in more further away remote communities that you wouldn't have otherwise had access to or communication with. But it just seemed like it was all the time, like every week or every month. And and it started to just kind of become disheartening and overwhelming how little help and support and treatment of underlying issues was not available. So
Yeah. I'm actually a suicide attempt survivor myself, and I've advocated for mental health for the last 4 or 5 years. So you are like, I'm a little starstruck right now because of what you did and what you stand for. So it's been really impressive to watch your journey, and well, just to sit here and talk to you today, it's really amazing. But this, I just read today that the suicide rates in the Indigenous community is 4.5 times higher than in any other communities. Like that was shocking to me. I knew it was higher, like maybe double or 3 times, but 4.5 times higher. That's like, I can't even wrap my head around it.
yeah,
How long did that walk take from going up north all the way to Regina?
I want to say about 29 days. It was less than a month. We left on July 2nd,
Oh, okay.
and we arrived on maybe the 28th or 29th of July.
Right. So
Yeah.
I know a lot of people know about your fasting in that, and that was 45 days, I believe, on the lawn. But there was a whole month before that you were already working on this stuff and basically suffering, I guess.
I can't
for your
remember the
cause.
exact number, but I believe it's like 680 kilometers from
Right.
Larange to Regina. So there were some days when we woke up, as early as we could, and walked until after the sun went down in July, which is quite late, and it seemed too dark to do it safely. And we would maybe reach a 39-kilometer mark, 40-kilometer mark. And then the next day do 32 kilometers. So like we were doing like these ridiculous amounts of distance day after day prior to arriving in Regina.
Yeah.
So during the entire walk, in the hot sun, with the bugs, with storms and hail, lightning, or just blue skies, I was looking forward to arriving. I thought that the park and the fast and the teepee camp would be the easy part.
That's all right.
that would be the rest period where I can set up the teepee. My friends could be around to greet others and help others and support people who arrived. And I could just kind of sleep all day. I had this really romanticized, idealized vision of what the camp would be like.
Mm-hmm.
And little did I know that that journey on the lawn was probably just as difficult, if not more, immensely more difficult than the walk,
Yeah, I imagine
because
so.
it entailed like a lot of mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion.
Right,
And not everybody who came to the site was there to be supportive or welcoming.
right.
Like, there were people that would bring me takeout and supper. And like I wasn't eating, obviously, but they would just bring these big packages of food with like grins on their faces and say, "Here, I just thought you might be hungry and you might want to eat this." And they were kind of like right wing. Some of them
Mm-hmm.
were kind of like a little bit of like a neo-Nazi vibe. And which I don't know, it just, to me, that was like very like manipulative and kind of disturbing, just how some people
Absolutely.
would act. And so that was annoying. I mean, that wasn't everybody, but obviously it was kind of just like you're in a public park, it's Regina, and I mean the street around the park and the legislative building is not exactly a mecca of good Samaritans after midnight.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We had some strange encounters, and it was kind of just like you're playing Russian roulette with people. You just never know what you're going to get with the next person, and so it's kind of like you're always on guard, you're always on edge, and so that was a strange journey. But all in all, like this was it was a it was a beautiful experience that we're all going to remember for the rest of our lives, and it was a healing experience for a lot of people, and cathartic, and a chance and a space to grieve and acknowledge the loss that a lot of families have suffered. And the families that came there, it was really beautiful to see that
Mm-hmm.
as they went to put flowers by the photo of their loved one, or sit and pray or grieve or do whatever their beliefs and religions dictated, they saw all of the other portraits and knew that there were all these other families, and that they weren't alone in that grief, or the depth of that loss, that this is an experience that a lot of our communities have gone through, and a lot of people um, of all different races and ages within our province of Saskatchewan have gone through.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of, to put it simply, an honor to be able to provide that space, because it didn't really exist
Yeah.
that level.
Yeah, it really was powerful and beautiful to see the images on TV and in the newspaper, and it really powerful. Uh, did you have any negative kind of experiences with people on the walk to Regina, or more so once you were in the park?
Not really on the walk. I
No.
mean, there were people that gave the finger, or like threw dimes out their windows driving by, and just a little bit of odd behavior, but not anything you might expect. Like we had some beautiful encounters, and some people would drop off a bucket of KFC here and there,
Mm.
and or sit with us, and it was a constant um, change of visitors on the highway, because sometimes people would walk for half an hour, 3 hours an afternoon. It just varied all the time, and they would have somebody follow us. Um,
Did you stay at people's houses, or did you have hotels?
well, for the northern part, the first 250 50 kilometers. It was a tent, which was amazing. Like, it was beautiful to be out in the fresh air, literally 24/7, and to finish a day, go find some place where we could drive our vehicle into the woods, find a little clearing, set up our big tent, and call it a night. That was the first leg of the journey, and then it was hotels from the cities onward, and that seemed to be okay because we started to pick up a pretty good pace, and the miles went by really quickly. And actually, once we hit the prairies, there was no more bugs. The wind was too strong, and the wind kept you really cool even on very hot days. So, yeah.
Okay, so once you got to the city and you got set up, you were there for a couple days, and you kind of had a first meeting with Minister Warren Kading and the Minister of First Nations, Métis, and Northern Affairs, Laurie Carr. What was that first kind of meeting with some ministers like?
Well, from people that were there to see it, they said that the mood was very somber and quiet and kind of seemed more like a funeral, like it was really grim. And they didn't have a lot to say. But I did show them everything and brought them inside and spoke to them. And they politely listened for a while. And then the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs, Laurie Carr, said, "I just want to inform you that I am the head of the Provincial Capital Commission, and we will be filing a court injunction for your removal because your presence here is in violation of the bylaws, and they apply to everybody."
Wow.
After she said that, I said, "Okay, well, thanks for stopping by." And they said, "However, we will give you an opportunity to voluntarily remove your teepee." And I said, "Well, I think, whatever, I don't care." They left. People came in uniforms, and nothing was done. They were bluffing the entire time. Because I think they realized that we weren't a very large, obtrusive space. I mean, we weren't harming anybody, and it wasn't like an unknown amount of time that we were going to be there. Like, it wasn't an indefinite presence on the lawn. So I think they kind of decided for public relations reasons to leave us alone.
Yeah.
But actually, they kind of didn't, because they took us to court.
That's right.
Luckily, that ended how it ended, and the judge allowed us to stay because of some constitutionally protected rights that all of us citizens have: freedom of assembly and freedom of religion. And the camp did have some political implications, but it was primarily ceremonial in its like context. Like, it was a fast in progress.
I have a couple questions about Judge Mitchell. But first, before you met him, you met with Chief Evan Bray, is that right? Of the police?
Yeah, he stopped by.
Okay. That's one of the interviews I did before yours, and he has nothing but great things to say about you. So I know he is a really great advocate for mental health and addictions. So I kind of wondered what that visit was like. I'm guessing he was very respectful and just kind of wanted to meet you and see what's happening, kind of thing, or?
Yes, he was very respectful.
So then they did try to take you to court. As an observer, it was a very powerful moment when Justice Graham Mitchell ruled in your favor, and even more so when he visited your site. What was that like for you? Did you feel like it was a powerful moment, like it was a big win, that maybe you were winning over people with power? Kind of explain the emotions you kind of had when all that kind of when all that happened.
He had heard so much about the camp from both sides of very polarized arguments. in different affidavits, etc., describing what that presence was and all of its implications. And some of them were quite negative. And so I think after the ruling was delivered and everything was said and done, and there was permission granted for me to carry out the duration of the fast and in our ceremonial aspects, he just wanted to see it for himself. And there were lawyers there in the court that said, Your Honor, I really suggest, if you do have the chance or opportunity, to see it. And that was just to kind of witness this constitutionally protected demonstration of freedom of expression firsthand. Little did he know that the day he decided to go and just take a look at the teepee from the sidelines of the park was actually our last day there.
Oh, I see.
That afternoon we had a very big feast and a lot of people present because we were going to take it down, and that was our final day. He came. He was on the outer perimeter of the park, just witnessing it, just wanted to see it. And there was a human rights lawyer there. And he said, I think it's really great you're here. That's amazing. You should come and meet Tristen. And he was a little bit shy, apprehensive, wanted to keep a low-key, subtle profile, you know. But in the end, he decided, okay, sure. And he came and shook my hand and met us and left. And that was that. But before he did leave, he was gifted a sash, and there was some photographs by the media that were taken. And then it made it into some more national right-wing papers, and they started screaming bias, bias, bias. But yeah, it was very nice that he came, and I thought that took a lot of courage. But he came there with so much humility and respect, and I'll always appreciate that and think very highly of him for that.
Yeah, not only was it bias, but there's actually been a judicial review on him about visiting the camp. They're grabbing at straws. I mean, one of their arguments about not having you there was the air quality of Regina because of your campfire. So it's almost laughable, but it's more insulting than laughable, I guess. But there was something something about not just why you were there, but about you personally. That's the beautiful way you spoke, the manner in which you kind of handled the whole situation, and it really seemed like you were winning over police, the judges, and even the public. Do you believe that, or do you think the folks like the police and the judges and that they are starting to see a need for change in the mental health, and that it was important why you were there, what a positive role it was, or do you think you were just that persuasive with people?
Well, a friend of mine said that it was very bright to create a Facebook page and have it be a separate entity from my Facebook, called Walking with Our Angels, so that our kind of public projection didn't have a lot to do with me in particular, so that it was kind of like this dissolving of ego. Like, to me, it was to give voice to the cause, to the story, to the purpose, and that, I believe, in and of itself, the story of why we were doing this, the reasons, were very bipartisan. It's something that anybody can get behind, regardless of race or age or class. And it's something that we all care about. So I believe that it was something that we could all support. and get back behind, because it wasn't just Indigenous people or an Indigenous cause, although I had a teepee, although I'm Indigenous and from the north. It's our entire province.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew the police really deeply cared about it, because who responds to all the overdose calls and has to deal with the first-hand trauma of discovering people close to death or having died, and the vicarious trauma that carries, and then the lack of mental health services provided to the people who go through that in their professional life. So I kind of saw this as something that everybody in the province would care deeply about. And it was just shocking and bewildering to me, some of the ridiculous criticism we would get. Like, there was a woman who said, I really support what you're doing, but is it just Indigenous suicide that you're trying to raise awareness? Because I can't support it if it's only Indigenous, because that's exclusionary, and I don't think that's right, that you should exclude other people and just make it about Indigenous people. And it's like, no, it's everybody. I just happen to be Indigenous. Sorry if that rubs you the wrong way, but I mean, this is the statistics affect everybody, although very clearly, undeniably,
Mm-hmm.
Indigenous people the most. Like, so whatever, but it's for everybody. So it was hard. I don't know, it was strange. I just I wanted to do justice to the portraits we had there, to the courage of the families who lent those, and to the communities who suffer these losses in such high, heartbreaking rates.
Well, I
I
think you
did
did
the
that.
best I could. And there were times when my patience was very thin and I wasn't as diplomatic with people as I should have been. But I mean, I was a hot-headed 24-year-old who was hungry, so.
Yeah, I was gonna add that part, that you hadn't eaten in weeks. So yeah, you just walked 700 kilometers and you haven't eaten in weeks. So get off my case, lady. Yeah. Um, do you think perhaps one of the reasons why there's lots of suicides in the Native community is because of the intergenerational trauma that's been happening since basically white people have been here?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very strong contributing factor.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I feel like this is a very complex topic and issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because when somebody takes their lives, they don't leave a bunch of essays and dissertations behind on all the reasons why they did it. And so they leave a lot of unanswered questions, and a lot of course, the why and the how could I have helped and what difference could I have made.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like those of us who are here, we're always going to be baffled by the people who have done this. And there will never be one all-encompassing answer or one all-encompassing umbrella solution. But what I did like to focus on when I would speak to media or people was that we can address some of the external factors that may contribute to a person arriving at a place of hopelessness, that are real, that are tangible, and that are not unfixable. And so I did speak a lot about the drugs in some communities, or the high rates of alcoholism, or the poverty, or the lack of access to even just very basic medical services in some communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke about things like that can be fixed, that are tangible. Because when you're dealing with something like suicide, like when it affects new generations, it's hard. It's hard to know those reasons. It's very yeah, to me it's really multifaceted, and
Right.
that's kind of why I felt that we needed very strong, powerful visual representations of the problem,
Mm-hmm.
because that would spark in people like the visceral feeling of loss and tragedy and heartbreak, more than statistics on a page in a brief ephemeral article might.
Mm-hmm.
So hence the portrait gallery. Like, to have to look at a photo of an 8-year-old girl who took her life, or a very beautiful young woman who just graduated high school and she has a big smile and it's her graduation photo. To have to confront photos like that, or a mother, or a man who's financially well off and by all appearances happy, smiling at the beach on a hot July day. To have to confront those photos, you're kind of speechless. There's so much that could be said, and at the same time, ironically, there's not enough that could be said about what that loss represents to the loved ones that they left behind. And so we needed like art to kind of express what we ourselves were very baffled to try and articulate. So that was the reason for this large portrait gallery. But it was also the reason for, like, say, what I did on the very last day.
Mm-hmm.
I cut my hair, and other people cut their hairs, and I tied all of our braids into a noose, and I hung the noose on the door handle of the Legislative Assembly, and let the media scrum photograph it for 15, 20 minutes, and then I burned it. And the fire that we had been keeping going 24/7, day and night, for the whole duration of the camp. Because visually, that says a lot more than I could to some journalist who's giving me 5 minutes. And so that's a very haunting image, and there's a lot to unpack there. And so I tried to do it in those ways, because our time was limited. The attention span of the public is limited, but something like a frozen frame of that photograph on the door will be looked at for generations and by historians for a long time. I think in many different disciplines. Like, there'll be people in mental health fields, social work field, or in indigenous studies of many different disciplines who could look at that picture of this braid in a noose on the door handle of a symbol of state power and colonialism.
Right.
I mean, we did the best we could with the time we had, and a lot of that stuff was just these really vibrant moments of inspiration where you just had an idea and you didn't really question it too much or try to pick it apart. You just sort of ran with it. So that was kind of a lot of what we did.
Yeah, getting ready for the interview today, and I was, for the last few days, and reading all types of articles and stuff. And I mean, I followed along as it was happening, but just to refresh my memory, I was actually getting emotional. Like, I was wiping tears out of my eyes, especially when I saw the pictures of the photo gallery, but reading and seeing the braid tied up as a noose, and then reading what your inspiration was to burn it and the symbolism that meant. it was very powerful. Like you said, like I said before, and like you said, you wanted kind of a powerful image as opposed to just some statistics on paper. And I 100% you accomplished that, because it was not just powerful, but really, really beautiful. So actually, Justice Mitchell, he also ruled that the Wascana Park bylaws actually had to be rewritten because of this court hearing. And just, was it Monday, 2 days ago, March 8th, the opposition called on the government to consult Indigenous leaders with the review. But does it surprise you that the PCC has stated that the review of the bylaws are already complete without any consultation with Indigenous leaders? Like they've gone ahead and already done it, and they've submitted it. Any surprise there for you?
Not really, but I know that they have to be very careful with the language of it, and not have it too open and free, I suppose, because it is a heavily regulated space, and right across the road is like federal critical infrastructure is what it would be under. So they got, I don't know, they have a lot of, I don't know, bureaucratic tape to consider. So I'm not too surprised there. Yeah. But
but to at least consult somebody,
it has to allow for constitutionally protected rights. So it'll benefit everybody, like in our province. Yeah,
I agree. The government's now created a Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. How hopeful are you that this new minister will actually create some changes and not just be, a PR thing?
Yeah. Well, as long as they're cooperative, able to deal with a lot of different people and different ideas, I think they could do a lot of good, because it's not just like the problem-solving brain of one individual. Like in our province, in our cities, our towns, our communities, there's a lot of different problems there. Like, so with mental health and addictions, like there's so many different factors. So they have a pretty big job ahead of them. And like, yeah, it's a hard one. It's a tough one. I'm scratching my head as much as anybody else.
Yeah. I work in addictions at a treatment center, the same treatment center I went to as a client, actually. And yeah, there's no easy answers. I know it's complex, and it is encouraging to see that they've at least created this new minister position. I just really hope it, there's some changes because of it. And like you said, it's every region's a little different too, whether it's because of poverty or drugs or alcohol or abuse or whatever. But so since you've had this experience, like, what are you up to now? Are you still kind of working on mental health advocacy, or are you kind of just taking time for yourself right now? And are you going to school? Are you working?
I'm a fiddle teacher. Like, I play the fiddle. That's my primary instrument. And I teach for a school division in Manitoba in rural and remote communities. So I do teach. And that's what I was doing prior to last summer's events. It was just that it was the summer months, and I have the summers free because the schools are closed. But regularly, ideally, I should be teaching in 4 different schools, 380 students. But because of COVID and different pandemic response teams working in different communities, I don't teach all of them, and I don't go to all these schools right now, but I still go and teach in some communities. So I'm busy doing that. And it's something that I really love to do because I like to travel. I love photography. I like to read, and I like my music. And it's beautiful to visit these communities that I wouldn't otherwise have ever stepped foot in or had the opportunity to see. The only downside is there's no Wi-Fi north of Thompson, Manitoba. Well, there is Wi-Fi, sorry, but it's like very slow and low bandwidth. What I mean is like there's no cell service, which is strange for 2021 for a kid that's grown up with his iPhone. But I manage, and it keeps me focused on the tasks at hand. So that's what I do. I consider music and art to be healing and part of emotional and mental well-being. And in communities where there's not a lot of access to things, I think this is really valuable and a really good use of time. So that's what I do.
I see. Well, I've said it already a couple times, but I hold you up on a very high pedestal. I think just the world of you. There should be folk songs written about you. But, you know, I'm a little biased, working in addictions and mental health myself. But and I apologize, too, for all the technical stuff and all the emails and messages, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing that way. But I really, really do appreciate you talking to me and having taken the time for this interview. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we leave, or anything else you wanted to say?
Well, thanks for asking to speak about this, and best of luck with your new endeavor and your new podcast. I hope it goes well. It was nice to talk to you, and it all worked out in the end. We got our audio.
I would like to give a huge thank you to Tristen Durocher for taking the time to speak to me about his journey. Again, I have just nothing but respect for that guy. Be sure to tune into the next episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I will be interviewing a young lady named Megan Burstick. She has a very powerful and tragic story. She had lost a father, 2 sisters, and a brother, all to suicide. I'll be speaking to her. She'll be telling her story, and you can catch that on the next episode. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe, rate, and review however you are listening to this podcast. It only takes a moment, and it really helps the show out with getting noticed. This episode has been sponsored by Regina Plumbing and Heating. Call 306-585-2000 for all your plumbing, heating, and cooling needs. If you are having a mental health crisis, please call the Canadian crisis number at 1-833-456-4566. In Saskatchewan, the mobile crisis team in Prince Albert is 306-764-1011. In Regina, it's 306-525-5333, and in Saskatoon, it's 306-933-6200. Don't forget to check out my children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Sometimes Daddy Cries is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Available on Amazon.ca. I'll see you next time. This is Todd Redebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Bye.